We live? All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to get started here. We have a presentation this morning on modernization of state personnel management system. We welcome folks from our administration. Secretary Edwards is with us. Nice to see you. Come on up. Catherine Hackman and Mark Townend, come on up. Welcome.
Is it okay if Secretary Grady joins us?
Yes, of course. Secretary Grady. I can't see far when I have these glasses on.
I got it.
Oh man, problems. Welcome, Secretary Grady. Congratulations on your budget this morning.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us here today, Chairman Barnes and Vice Chair Chang. We're very excited to present to this committee the work that we have done around the modernization of the state personnel system. I just want to acknowledge Team DBM, who is here with me today. I served as the chair of the task
Secretary,
force.
I hate to do this. You know, we have to record live and we're having a technical issue. Can we just pause for everybody stay put? Just when we get back streaming, we'll just pick it back up. We want to make sure the public doesn't miss anything we're doing.
Got it.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Great.
In the it's snowing because those would be also bitterly cold. Again, this is like 62 days.
I like that.
I hate this weather. It is warm.
So we have a good fix here. We're gonna not show the PowerPoint. We'll just follow along the PowerPoint on our laptops, but everything else should be ready to go. So committee, just follow along with the PowerPoint on your laptops. With that, welcome.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Great. Thank you, Chairman Barnes, Vice Chairman Chang, and members of the Appropriations Committee. We're very excited to be here today to talk to you about the work of the task force on the modernization of the state personnel management system. My name is Secretary Tisha Edwards. I am the Secretary of Appointments for Governor Westmore and served as the chair to this particular task force. I'd also like to recognize other folks who are here with me to share in the presentation. First of all, my favorite secretary, because she has all the money, Secretary Helene. Well, that's true. Secretary Helene Grady and her team from DBM, who were the lead staff for this effort. So Laura Volkel, Catherine Hackman, and Mark Townend were all key to the work that I'll be presenting today. And finally, I'd just like to acknowledge my task force colleagues. We had an amazing group of folks who helped to do this work. It was really a team effort. We had wide representation from the agencies. We had union representation, and we also had private sector representation on this task force, and everybody participated and helped to bring forward the recommendations that you have. And we do have a few task force members here in the audience today that are here in support of this body of work that we've been working on. So again, thank you so much for having us here. All right, so I'm going to jump right in and talk about what the high-level goals were for this task force. We met 7 times in all of our meetings, highly attended. We even had some audience members. I told them this was the most exciting task force that the General Assembly had directed us to pull together. Our goals were to improve the hiring process and applicant experience, to pursue proactive recruitment strategies, to look at how we could improve job attractiveness, and think about expanding career ladders and reviewing job requirements. So we had a few key findings. I'm going to give those to you right out the gate, and then we'll talk a little bit more in detail about those findings. Our first finding of the task force is that the current process is very labor intensive, lengthy, and a little difficult, which I'm sure is why you all asked us to do this work to begin with. There are few guidelines or best practices associated with our hiring timeline. There's no dedicated ownership over recruitment. As you all know, we have DBM, which is kind of the main personnel system, the main org, and then it's decentralized once you get into the agencies. So every agency kind of has their own HR team. And so there is some degree of variability by agency, big agencies, small agencies. And so we found that there's a lot of variability across agencies, which does create some challenges around dedicated ownership. Next slide. And so in order for the committee and the public to kind of understand what the timelines are, what some of the, where do we bottleneck, we thought it was important to provide a workflow, and that you can also see what is the applicant experiencing, because we were very, very focused on folks coming wanting to come into state government day one. Once you make that decision and submit an application, what is that individual experiencing? Because that can make or break whether or not they move forward and feel good about joining state service. So I'm going to pass over to my colleague, Mark, who's going to talk about that particular experience and what the workflow looks like.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Great. So the first thing that has to happen from our side, and that slide basically demonstrates the lack of contact to the applicant, because there's a lot of stuff going on the state side that's required by statute, and that's what I'm going to cover briefly. To start a recruitment, you have to have an updated position description that the manager puts together and make sure that everything is up to date. It's not the position description of the last person. It's supposed to reflect the actual duties that has to be presented to the person interviewing for the job as part of statute. A position selection plan is then submitted to DBM that contains all the information on how we're going to recruit, or how the agency is going to recruit. It's sent to our secretary because Secretary DBM is the secretary in all language regarding personnel. So it has to come to DBM for review. It has to include a number of things, including the minimum qualifications, the limitations on selection, the location, the open period, the close date, which must be a minimum of 2 weeks open. It has to have where you're going to advertise, how the testing will be done, and that has to also be sent to EEO for review and approval. DBM will assist if a smaller agency or a larger agency is overwhelmed and doesn't have the staff to do it. So we're backup for anybody who gets too busy. We check priority consideration lists. There are 2 lists out there that have to be checked before we can recruit. One of them is a part of the DHS agreement, the Welfare to Work agreement, where we check to see if there's an eligible candidate in training that could do the duties of the job. Another list that we have to check is the layoff list. That gets priority consideration for any laid off state employee. Then we have to consider transfers, reinstates, disabled veterans, and people who are certified by the Division of Rehabilitative Services. Once you've looked at all those lists and decided to forge ahead with your recruitment, you can proceed to post on the web. If you do that, you submit your announcement to us. We take a look at it, make sure that it follows sort of the feel and the brand and the look that we want on the state's website, and it includes all pertinent information required by law. And there is quite a bit, but too much to go into. Once the recruitment closes, by statute, we have to review for minimum qualifications. We have to notify those people who are not qualified. We have to give 2-week notification if there's a follow-up written test once you've been qualified. We have to review the test for readiness, for make sure it's valid and appropriate based on the job. We have to apply a rating of training and experience if we're not going to do a written test. So we would review the application, and this is done in person. We don't use any AI, or there's no buzzwords like the federal government does. The state reviews each application and provides a rating of that applicant based on the criteria provided by the manager. We have to resolve any discrepancies. A lot of times in an online system like our applicant tracking system, a person would submit and they might, like myself, put Mark Townend on their application, but in fact, I'm in the system as a state employee, Gene Mark Townend. So they would have to then go back and reconcile that that's the same person, so we don't issue another ID for them because they already have one, and all the benefits would need to move with them. We also have to check for flags on reemployment. Some people are flagged for a number of reasons, and those flags need to be alleviated before they can be considered for rehire. We have to add selection credits. There's a number of selection credits. We add for veterans get credit, spouses of veterans in certain situations, people with disabilities, residents of the state of Maryland, current state employees get a 1/4 point per year up to 5 points total. All those have to be added in. Once all the scores are banded together, once they're all added up, we band them together in one of 3 classifications. You're either best qualified, better qualified, or minimally qualified. Then there is a selection process. That list then goes to the manager for their interviews and their hiring. The manager has to start with the best qualified candidates and work their way down. There are numerical quotas. If you want to move down to the better qualified, you have to interview at least 5 from the best, 5 from the better. So there's a lot of statute involved in the process. There's rules for interviewing. You have to interview a minimum of 3 people for a position. It is 5 if we recommend that for salary reasons. Once everything's done and you've made your selection, you have to submit as a program your appointment certification to DBM for review to make sure that you have an appointment certification form on file. And that's generally what's going on our side. The applicant only, as mentioned earlier, gets 2 or 3 maybe notifications. While we're doing all that over the several weeks that it takes us to hire a person, on the applicant side, they would get a bounce back saying that their application has been received. They would get a notification if they're not qualified. They would get a notice of test results. We just issue that to everybody to tell you that you're best, better, or qualified. And then ostensibly, it could be the last contact you have from the state. So again, the purpose of that slide was to show that while we're doing what we do by requirement, the actual applicant may not be seeing a whole lot of contact from us.
Great. All right, so I am going to take you to, just so that we're all on the same page. I think Mark has just gone through the workflow versus the candidate view. And basically what he just told you is it takes about 127 days to go through an application to hiring process within the state. I'm going to take you to page 7 just to make sure everybody's tracking with me. Page 7 looks differently. Got it. Thank you. And so on page 7, you see one of the things that I thought was really interesting is the number of applicants that have applied for positions in the state year by year. And we're, I want to make sure I frame this correctly. We're kind of going through what some of the challenges are, and we do have some solutions, so don't worry about that. But one of the things that's really interesting on this chart that you have in front of you is that you see in 2013, there was like a real peak in terms of job applications, near 350,000. And we've kind of trended downward, and good for us. We're kind of back on the move and trending back upward in 2023. It looks like, Mark, if I'm not mistaken, we had over 200,000 applicants. So not as good as 350,000 applicants, but not really bad that 200,000 people applied, submitted applications to the state of Maryland. And so that does tell you that there's a lot of interest and a lot of demand to work for the state. So that's really, really good news. The challenge is what happens when we get those applications. That's where we start to experience some challenges, but very high 10 years ago. But again, very excited that we're kind of turning things around and getting more folks interested in state service. Next, thank you. All right, so what else did we find were some of the challenges from an applicant experience perspective? I'm on slide 8. Applicants receive little to no communication during the hiring process, and we'll talk more about this. You've put out an application, you've been out there 127 days waiting to hear from the state, and I think that's a place where we think that we could get much better is proactive communication and letting people know where their application stands. The state does not proactively connect applicants to job openings. So this is another one I found super interesting. I apply for a job. Guess what? Only one person can get that job. But there are other jobs that I could be suitable for. We don't have a way to redirect folks to other options that are available to them. And so sometimes you're kind of spinning in this wheel. It's not that you're not great and that we don't want you. Of course we want you, but you're not being kind of proactively redirected to openings as they become available. The onus is on the applicant, and they have to keep coming back and completing applications over and over again. Another applicant experience finding is that state job titles and job openings are difficult to navigate. Who here knows what an administrator 5 is? Anybody? Going once, going twice. We have no idea. And so that's the first thing you see on the job application is administrator 5. I don't even want that on my resume. Like, who's the 10? Am I the 1? What is a 5? It just doesn't feel like a good job to have unless 5 is the best, but I don't know, right? So we're not speaking in real plain English, and we're not telling folks what is the job I'm applying for very specifically in layman's term. On the task force, we called it goobly gop gop gop. And so we need to do a much better job of speaking in plain language. And guess what? A job description is a marketing document. And we need to be getting people excited about the state. And an administrator 5 position is nothing to be excited about, right? So what is that job? And so there's a lot of work that we can do around job titles and job openings so people know what they're applying for, can be excited about what they're applying for, and feel like it's transferable to your next job. Next. We also talked a lot about recruitment. And so some of the findings related to recruitment is that our current efforts are not attracting young job seekers. I don't know, lucky for you or not for me, our sweet spot in the state is mid-career professionals. And we have some reasons about why, but we need to get young people excited about state service. And there are lots of great benefits to joining the state much younger. And so we want to think about how do we make this, we want to be the premier workplace for 21st century workers. And we're not really that right now, right? So there's a lot of work that we can do that. State agencies have limited options to use when trying to streamline the hiring process. And so everything that you heard my colleague Mark talk about, it's done by hand, it's done by individuals. It's a paper pen process. What do you do when you have 200,000 people applying to state government and we're on the back end with paper and pen? Not good. All right. And we don't have a lot of dedicated funding right now in the budget for marketing and doing outreach and having a campaign around this being a great place to work, which is really interesting. Without very little effort, you still get 200,000 applications. So just think what it would be if we really invested in it. But we then need to have the back end to be able to support that influx of applications. Next. So wanted to give you on slide 10, just kind of an overview of what we've talked about of who's applying. As you can see, state service looks really good for people my age. I'm not going to tell you which one of those boxes, but you can do the math, right? So state service is very great for my age bracket, but I want my kids to be interested in state service. And the data just says that we're not doing a really good job with that, actually 43 and younger. So we have a lot of work to do there. And the other thing we wanted to know is, where are people coming from? Good news, we're getting a lot of folks. People say that we don't compete with the private sector. Not 100% true. A lot of people at said age bracket leaves private sector and is ready to give back and is looking for a different type of experience, changing jobs. And so we attract a lot of folks from the private sector, which is really, really great. We also have a lot of folks in state government moving across agencies, which I think is also a good thing because you get to benefit from the learnings across agencies. And then we have folks coming in from nonprofit, federal government, and other places. Next. Slide 11. We wanted to give you a sense of how do people hear about state service. I just want to give another shout out to DBM. This is a group that does more with less. They use social media a lot. The free social media, and they do a lot of promoting on LinkedIn and Facebook and those kinds of things. They're not TikTok, but they are LinkedIn and Facebook, and they do a lot of kind of outreach, and they understand their responsibility to bring folks in. I thought it was really great that we have lots of state employees referring people to state service, right? Friends and relatives, which I think is really wonderful. That says a lot about us, that you would want someone that you love to work for state government. So we should be really proud of that. And then you see the others, social media advertisements. We're doing more job fairs, going into communities and meeting people where they are. We know a lot of people don't have the internet. And so I'm really excited about a lot of our state agencies are really, really willing to go into communities. And I know that some of you all have heard about that. Another interesting set of data is why applicants are attracted to the state. The number one reason is stability, which is why it makes sense that age bracket that we talked about comes to state government. By the time we get at this point in our career, we want a little stability. We're thinking about retirement. We're thinking about health benefits, which is a great recruitment of the state. People want to do meaningful work. We should all pat ourselves on the back for that people still see state service as a place for impact and giving back. Health benefits, career growth and development, salary, not the top of the list, but not at the bottom of the list either. So we've kind of laid out for you what are the reasons why people have said that they want to join us in state service. Next slide. Job attractiveness. What were some of the key findings there? We talked about this a little bit. Job classifications are vague, uninspiring, and do not offer insight into the role. I think that's super important for young professionals. They like transparency. They like job titles that make sense. I guess we all like that, but particularly young people. And they really want to see how this connects to your goals. If you are a person who majored in politics in undergrad and the job says administrator 5, does that make sense to you? No, it does not. So that is some of the feedback we got. Agencies use the same job classifications for totally different jobs, which is really confusing. And job postings are too wordy and do not highlight the benefits of state employment. Again, we are a great employer. We provide amazing benefits for folks. And we've got to see these job announcements as outreach, marketing, and PR for the state. And we really don't do that. Then we talked about career ladders and pathways. Again, we had two major findings here. Certain jobs do not offer sufficient progression to encourage retention. That's really important. We don't want people to get trained up here and then go somewhere else. We want people working with us. We want them to make a commitment to us. It takes a lot to train someone to do a job. And so every time we train people up and they feel like they've hit a glass ceiling and they leave, not only are we losing the person, we're losing the investment in the person. So we need to do a much better job around making sure people see a trajectory and a progression for their careers. There's a lot that we need to do with on-the-job training for entry-level jobs and talent pipelines. What do you do when you do have a young person who just graduated from college 2 years ago and they've been a waitress or they've been in retail, but they want to come into state service? We should be able to manage that. We should have entry pathways to develop folks. And so we don't really have that. You to come to state service, it's almost like you got to have a baked pie. And we can do better than that. We can have people who are starting out, people who are changing, and we should have the capacity to develop talent in the state. And we don't really do that. You got to kind of come ready. And so that's something that we think we need to fix. When we looked at job requirements, one of the things that we've already been working on is we all know that degrees can be obstacles and barriers. Why do we have some of these really, very rigorous standards when it doesn't match what the job is? And having a college degree is a great thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you should be able to get in jobs and be trained, and not every job requires a college degree. And so I think we need to be a little bit more intentional about that. When you need it, you need it. Okay. But when you don't need it, why are we saying we need it? Right. So that's something we can work on. And hiring managers experience lack of flexibility over job requirements. Some of these jobs, as Mark has talked about, there are statutory reasons. There are reasons related to our relationships with the unions. There are lots of reasons why historically jobs are put in a box. And we've got to get out of that box a little bit. And we've got to really take an intentional and critical review of job requirements so that they match our needs, our current needs as a state workforce, and so that we're really attracting the new talent. And so there's a mismatch there. So going on to slide 15, what are some of the things that we can do to address all of these findings that I've just reviewed with you? So first and foremost, we got to get our house in order. We really need to do a lot of work around educating our staff, around changing the culture, around talent, and workforce development. We sometimes get in our own way. And so there's some work that we need to do there. And so what specifically do I mean by that? The task force really felt strongly that we need to move towards continuous ratings of applicants. During Mark's comments, you heard him talk about it's like you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. Why can't we have a more integrated and dynamic process? Right now, you have to wait until all of your applications come in. You have to wait until the job posting closes. Then that's when you start rating these applicants. What if you have 100 applications and you've waited 45 days, 30 days before you start to rate those applications? We can, as my governor says, chew gum and walk at the same time. So we should think about how do we have more continuous process that isn't so static. The other thing that we need to do is improve communication with applicants throughout the process. That was like a big issue for us. You know, I think in this day and time, you should be able to put your ID in the portal and you should know where your application is. You are in the review stage. You are, how are you ranked? There should just be a kind of life cycle or workflow that applicants have real transparency, clear transparency about where they are in the process. We talked about use of opening and continuous job openings. What you see now is a job is put out there, it's closed. You don't find a good person, you got to go back and advertise again. I think that we should consider keeping these job announcements open until the position is filled so that we don't have these stop and start, which expands the time period. As we talked about, we need to update our job titles and position descriptions. And then we need to encourage promotion and reclassification to improve retention. We need to keep folks, we got to hire a lot of people, but we got to keep the folks we have. And we're losing people because we're not taking care of them. We're not offering them promotions. We're not reclassifying their jobs so that they have more earning opportunity. People are leaving the state. They're taking all of that investment and they're leaving and going to other places. And we've got to really work on retention. Another big area for us is that we need DBM to think about reclassification and salary activities. That means we want to continue to look at removing the degree requirements when we don't need them. And as I've talked about before, expand career progressions. And then the other thing that we're going to be doing in very short order, and Secretary Grady has, we benefited from the expertise of one of our colleagues who was the former executive director for over 17 years of state service, a total of 33. And so the previous executive director for the Office of Personnel Services recently retired. And she was tired. She had worked for us for 30 plus years, so that is allowed. But now we need to recruit and hire an amazing executive director who can really take this work to the next level. And so we are currently recruiting for a new executive director. So that is the formal presentation on slide 16. I'm not going to go through the roll call with you, but again, I just want you to know that this was a team effort. All of the folks sitting here with me today and the folks outlined on this slide, everybody contributed, everyone cared. And I hope that makes this committee understand how important we thought this was. And we thank you for bringing us here to talk about it today.
And all the great work that you've clearly done in the interim, you and your team, a lot of hard work and some really useful information here. So we appreciate that very much. Why don't we take questions for Secretary Edwards and her team, and then we can move to the presentation from Secretary Grady, if that makes sense. Delegate Acevera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Appreciate your presentation. Question on recruitment and retention. So two things. One is we see oftentimes state employees going from the state to local government where pay is more, there's a lot more benefits, et cetera. But that coupled with the fact that, you know, our neighboring jurisdiction, Virginia, I think they just last year indicated that they're going to be beefing up their hiring for their state. I think the goal was a little over 400,000 state employees, et cetera. And so I say that to say, was any consideration given to or did any of this factor into how you all intend to, I guess, reform this process so that folks have an even easier, more streamlined experience in applying for like state jobs? Did we consider what Virginia is doing? Because, you know, we could potentially lose state employees to Virginia, but also why it is that state employees are somehow finding county or local government more attractive than state government. And I say this as someone that comes from Montgomery County and certainly a good bit of Montgomery County public employees. I don't want to say all, but we do see a good bit of them coming from the state. So any consideration was given to that, any discussions, and how you all intend to incorporate that into these recommendations?
So I'm going to share in the response to your very good question. The first thing is retention absolutely matters. We cannot hire our way out of this. We need to keep the people that we have. And I think there are a couple of things that we're working on. And again, I'm going to defer to Secretary Grady and allow her to weigh in. But the research is clear. People don't just go or stay in a job because of money. Money is important, but how you're treated matters. How you feel about your job and the people you work with matters. And it's starting to matter more to people, what their work conditions are in the environment in which they're working. And so I don't want to, I'm going to let Secretary Grady talk about some of the things that we're doing, but because I was involved in this effort that we've just recently launched, we've done a first time ever culture survey for state employees, where we are asking all 40,000+ state employees to give us feedback on their working situation and around these core values. And we see that as an extraordinary opportunity to get feedback and to dial in our management practices so that we can support retention. I think Secretary Grady is going to talk a little bit about our thoughts around salary, because that is what happens a lot when you're competing with locals. And quite frankly, what we would like to be able to is to bring people from local government to state government, not lose people from state government to local. So I think you're 100% right on that.
Sure. Thank you. And first of all, I do want to express my extreme gratitude to Secretary Edwards for chairing this task force. She did a phenomenal job along with the task force members and have given us a lot to think about and to plan for with regard to SPMS. So we're very excited to embark on this work with the recommendations. In terms of salary and retention, it's definitely, there's a little bit of an update in the deck that we'll do on the state workforce. And we launched this summer a compensation study, which from what I understand might be the first time, at least in recent history, if not longer time, that the state has done a study of how our salary scales compare to surrounding states, some of our largest counties, the federal government, and a couple of private sector employers. And so we've taken in the results of that salary study as of early December. We've actually committed with several of the unions to convene a labor management committee early this year to talk through the recommendations, the analysis, and come up with some next steps around how to address the salary disparities that we see. Key finding, I think it's in the presentation, is our salary scale midpoints for the SPMS, or the standard pay plan, I'm sorry, are close to 9% below the median midpoint for the comparison group. And so it's significant and something we need to address. And really look forward to digging into that work. It's not going to be easy, particularly given budget outlooks and things, but I think it's really important to have the data to develop probably a multi-year plan around how we want to, position the state salary wise relative to our competitors like Virginia and others.
And why don't I do this committee? Why don't I step back and let Secretary Grady do your presentation, since some of these questions probably
Overlap.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chairman Barnes and members of the committee. My name is Helene Grady. I'm Secretary of Budget and Management, and much of our DBM leadership team, particularly our OPSB team, are here with me. And so I'm happy to have folks come up who are subject matter experts in certain areas and help answer questions as well. We did submit just a few slides that really just very brief update on our work around rebuilding state government, and Secretary Edwards has been a key partner to DBM on much of this work beyond even the task force. Just a couple slides that we can share on how are we doing. We get this question regularly. How are we doing against the governor's goal when he came into office of filling approximately, half or 50% of the vacancies, or cutting the vacancy rate by half, depending on how folks heard the goal. And what we can say is we're making great progress. It's been challenging, and I think state agencies across the board have been really engaged, which has been very encouraging. Our HR managers, directors across state agencies have been working very closely with the DBM team really since probably February at strategies and tactics for how to tackle this work and fill these vacancies. And we are seeing some results. While we haven't hit the governor's goal that he set by December, we're making really great progress. The first slide just shows that as of January, the vacancy rate in the executive branch, this excludes higher education, was about 13%, 13.4%, with about 6,500 vacancies. And as of the end of December, we can report we're at about 10.10% and just over 5,000 vacancies. The next chart I think is pretty compelling, which shows the net hires. So, we talked a lot about retention and the importance of keeping current staff alongside recruiting in new staff. And what we can report is that for calendar 2023, we achieved 1,300, just over 1,300 net hires. That means 1,300 more people hired into roles than people who left. And that compares to two previous calendar years where the state was at a negative deficit on net hiring of 857 and 1,801 the year before. So we've definitely turned that around a bit. I think we have good momentum coming into 2024, because when you look through the calendar year, we were making great progress really summer into fall. It took a little bit of time, I think, early in the calendar year to get going. But I think we have a lot of momentum heading into 2024. So I anticipate seeing continued progress. The next slide just gives you a little bit of snapshot across our larger agencies, agency by agency, of how their vacancy rates have changed. And there's some great stories in here. Transportation at the top of the chart, you can see, has improved considerably from February, which are the blue bars, to December, which are the red bars. Several other agencies here as well, HCD and General Services at the bottom, you can see have improved by just about half on their vacancy rates. Agriculture, I think agriculture might hit the top in terms of their progress. They're right in the middle of the chart here, and you can see they started the year just over 14% and ended the calendar year just over 6% on vacancies, which is really fantastic. Couple other updates. So I talked a few minutes ago about the compensation study that we launched, really rich data that came back. Paul Webb, our Director of Classification and Salary, is here with us today. And he and his team, put a tremendous amount of effort into that study alongside our consultant, which I'm very grateful for. And they have found the results to be really rich, and are eager to kind of get going to think through next steps and how we might adjust our pay plan, particularly the standard pay plan and the correctional pay plan, as a result of the recommendations. The other update I would share is one that Secretary Edwards mentioned. So the employee culture survey, I'm very excited about this. And actually it was this hearing last year where I think many members of the committee raised for us and asked whether we had done culture surveys. And I heard, great interest in the state doing something like that. And we kind of got to work right away at procuring a vendor to help us with this. The survey will be in the field January 22nd. That's next week, I think, and closes on February 2nd. And then it'll be about 4 to 6 weeks for results. Again, Secretary Edwards has played a key role, along with others on the governor's staff, at really taking the lead here to define the survey, and think through the metrics that we want to collect back, think through the values that are priorities for us across our workplace, and how we can work with this vendor to kind of measure or benchmark the extent to which those values are exhibited in our workplaces today. So we're really eager to see those results, and then again, develop some action plans in conjunction with our unions and others. We have been collaborating with the unions on the culture survey. I think they generally are pretty enthusiastic. I'm sure we'll hear from Denise about the results and the action plans coming out of that as well. So a lot of exciting work going on. This team's been working incredibly hard over this last calendar year, which I'm extremely grateful for, and I think all to the benefit of really strengthening the state workforce.
Thank you, Secretary Grady, for the presentation and the great information and all the work that you've been doing. Progress, to be sure. So thank you for that.
Sure.
All right, well, now let's open questions for Secretary Edwards, Secretary Grady, or their team. I think we had Delegate Solomon Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's good to see you both, and Secretary Edwards. I tried to be as many of the work group meetings as I could as a personnel subcommittee chair. So kudos to you and your team. And I know it really was a collaborative effort. And I also just want to start off by saying congratulations. I know we're going to hear from Denise shortly, but obviously you all struck a really historic agreement with AFSCME. I don't think everybody got 100% of what they wanted, but that's probably the sign of a really good agreement.
Negotiation.
Yeah. So, I know it's really important to our committee that our state workers are cared for, as I know it is to the administration. So congratulations on that. I had a couple of questions for you, Secretary Edwards, and I'm really excited. I wanted to give you all a wide berth on the budget before we sat down and kind of dug in a little bit more, because I know our committee really wants to be helpful on making sure that we're implementing a lot of the really good stuff that's in here. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, the report had a lot of really great recommendations in it, and I thought the context on each recommendation was also really helpful. And one of the points that just kept coming up was, there was that great idea around the common application, which I think a lot of us are really interested in, or, again, you said dedicated recruitment staff. I think that would be wonderful to have somebody sort of Sherpa everybody's application through, or one primary point of contact. But again, what kept coming up was, we could do this, but it would require a lot more staffing on our part. We'd need more dedicated funding. You said the same thing about marketing. I haven't had a chance to dig through the whole budget yet, but are there plans? Go figure. But are there plans, is there money allocated in this year's budget to give you more pins, more ability to do the kind of things that are outlined in here?
So I can take that question for Secretary Edwards. There are a couple of highlights in the governor's budget, which were not covered in our presentations this morning, because they're on the smaller side. But there are a couple of investments reflected in the budget that the governor in particular is really enthusiastic about. They're more at this point, the approach that we've taken in the budget is towards putting aside some funding into dedicated purpose account. So more one time at this point. We haven't added a lot of pins to OPSB for recruitment. My view on that is that we need to plan first. Like I think we really need a plan for what permanent resources do we need? How do we want to structure these operations? And to be honest, in part, I'm looking to the incoming executive director to really help shape that vision and plan based on experience that they'll bring from their previous work. And so what we've done in the meantime in the budget is pretty meaningful. There's a proposed $3 million contribution to a dedicated purpose account to continue our work on rebuilding government. So year 2, you might remember that in fiscal 24, the budget included, I believe it was 2 or 2.5 million toward our rebuilding government work. That money also to a dedicated purpose account, so it's not ongoing funds, but that money went to support both the salary study and the culture survey for 2 years worth of culture survey services. And we're looking to do something similar with this appropriation should it make it through the General Assembly. And part of the focus of these funds would be around next steps based on the task force recommendations. Again, one-time money, so not necessarily new pins or permanent staffing, but resources to help us build out those plans so that for next year's budget, we may have a better sense of exactly how we want to direct resources and also a better sense of budget outlook in terms of how to grow this function a bit. I think absolutely my observations this first calendar year is that I think OPSB over the years has been really, really woefully underfunded for the scope of responsibility that they have. And it's pretty, I shouldn't say shocking because I know well the history of structural deficits at state government. And so this is what happens, but this is an area that's been significantly depleted over the years. And I would say in the area of recruitment, in the area of professional development and training. And so that is another focus area for us that we hope to deploy some of these funds toward to help develop a plan. On the side of professional development and training, which is so critical to retention, there is one new position proposed in the budget for a director. We actually don't have any staff today dedicated to professional development and training for SPMS. And we've at least put a director level role in to, again, recruit someone on board along with our next executive director to help build out that plan, and then come back with a more specific sort of pitch on what level of resources will be required. The other key thing in the budget related to this work is there is a proposed $2.5 million, again, contribution to a dedicated purpose account to launch a pilot program for apprenticeships in state agencies. Members of the DBM OPSB team, some of whom are here today, have been working hard for probably about a year now together with Department of Labor to scope out a plan. We do have a pretty specific plan on how we want to proceed with some apprenticeships. Department of Labor has some federal grant funds that they were awarded this summer that they're really eager to deploy. And so with this funding, we hope to establish some apprenticeship pins to run a 2 to 3 year course and get some results from that to decide on permanent structure going forward.
I think we stand ready to work with you. The other thing, and you don't have to answer this one right now, if there are any statutory changes in particular, there were a couple of things pinpointed in the report, particularly in the continuous rating piece, if there's anything that we can be of assistance on to make sure that gets done. And then the last question I had, particularly on the report, the one group that I didn't really notice mentioned was people with disabilities. And we know that unemployment rate for people with disabilities is give or take usually double what it is for the other categories. And I'm just curious, I know there's been conversation in the Department of Disabilities of using the state as sort of a model employer. I'm curious if you could speak to, and again, we can talk more about this later, opportunities that we have to work with the disability community to make sure that is, I think, a huge untapped resource of folks who really want to be employed. Again, I think the purpose of mission is really something that is attractive. So how can it's a win-win. How can we do more of that?
No, I think you're 100% right on all of your points. Thank you for raising the fact that there could be an opportunity to look at the statute to see if there are ways to make sure that statutorily we can do the work that we've outlined. That would be helpful. And to your second point about inclusivity and engaging the disabilities community, I think you're 100% right on that also. I am really happy about the relationship that Secretary Beatty has with all of our cabinet secretaries, and we're actually trying to do, all of us are committed to doing much more around integrating the Department of Disabilities with the core work that we're all doing, whether it is in our personnel side and hiring people, our service year program, our appointments work. I mean, we need to absolutely tap into that community and make sure that they are part of state government. So appreciate that. And that is absolutely on our radar, and we'll continue to move that work forward.
And Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, I have one more question on the compensation study. Thank you. So moving on to the compensation study, and I appreciate that, Secretary Edwards. I guess I had sort of two very quick questions. One, I thought it was wonderful, and the recommendations are really helpful. I love the fact that they mentioned restoring the education benefit program, and I will give a shout out. MDOT has a partnership with University of Maryland Global Campus that UMGC was telling me has been wonderful. And to me, that's a win-win. We're growing our university system. It's online, so it's accessible to all. So would encourage potentially looking at that again. But the two questions I had were, First, the only private sector employer that I saw listed on the benchmark group of peers was MedStar. And I know particularly for certain types of job classifications, especially in IT, I mean, I can't say I have hard data on this, but anecdotally, I keep hearing from agencies, they keep losing people. We had a lot of conversations about that, particularly in the Joint Audit Committee. So I'm curious as to why there wasn't some more reflection of the private sector wages that I think we're losing employees to. And then the other question is, it was helpful to see the specific vacancy rates. Is there a plan within either your office, Secretary Edwards, or DBM to maybe provide sort of special teams to help agencies really ramp up their recruitment? Obviously, DJS I know is a huge priority for our committee. It's a huge priority for the governor. It's great that their vacancy rate is down, but it's still at 12%. So are you all tasking groups to sort of focus in to help specific agencies with those high vacancy rates close the gaps?
So first of all, I think Mark is a really good person to talk about the work that we're doing at the agency level to get everybody the support that they need on closing the vacancy rate.
So the short answer is yes. We are the oversight and they're the actual people who do the work. But we have been meeting monthly with the different agencies regarding the various things that they recruit for. We have specialized recruiters at DBM who focus on that population. So DJS, Juvenile Services, is actually Brooke in our office who used to work for DJS. She has a good understanding of the Resident Advisor series and the other series that they recruit for. So we do have things that we can do centrally, social media advertising, getting out in the public, taking their announcements, advising them maybe on how to get a better traction in their advertising and things of that nature. We do also provide backfill, as mentioned earlier. If they're going somewhere and they need additional people, we'll do that, or we'll cover some of their sort of the grunt work to get them free to be able to go out and do things in the community.
Great. And then just the question on the private sector piece.
Sure. So thanks for raising it. It's actually a really good point. And I know that we did include MedStar. I think we attempted to include Hopkins as another private sector comparator. And I think the consultant had a difficult time accessing data from Hopkins. I've been asked why that might be and why folks at DBM couldn't help with that. But unfortunately, we didn't end up including having Hopkins in the final. But I think it's a really good point, particularly when, I think as we were crafting the study RFP, DBM's focus was primarily on higher ed and healthcare as private sector comparators for so many of our jobs, but not as focused probably on the technology side. So I think it's a really good point. We've been doing, Paul Webb and his team have been doing quite a bit of work looking at our salaries for IT positions. There's a lot of competition, even interagency for IT talent. And they're going to be doing some focused work in the months ahead with Do It to make sure that those salaries are set appropriately relative to where MDOT's IT salaries are and others. So there may be an opportunity for us to actually circle back on IT roles in particular, together with Secretary Savage, and maybe go a little bit deeper on salary studies there as well.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much to the Personnel Subcommittee Chairman for the extensive questions. Next, we'll have a question from Delegate Wallach.
And thank you, Secretary Edwards. This work is not glamorous, but it is so essential. My heart is beating really fast as you're talking about all of this, because I have lived through some of this experience on the other end, and have a series of questions just to understand and to potentially provide some recommendations as well. So one of the ways, one of the challenges of working for state or in the public sector is, of course, moving from one job to another is very difficult, specifically if you're moving from, one set of requirements that are very laid out, and then you want a different agency altogether and different mission. And having a rotational program stood up that allows for folks to move around. There is a parallel for it in the federal government, which is the Presidential Management Fellows. That program itself needs to get expanded, but if we can mirror something like that on the state level, and it doesn't need to be small, I think it could be big, and people can move around, and it could be a great resource for retaining great, staff. The other issue is entry-level positions. Now, you mentioned how finding young talent and bringing them in is a challenge. I often find that, and I work with young people as well. So I often find that for an entry level position, it'll have a whole set of requirements that you need to already know how to do. And oftentimes an entry level position may even say you need 2 years of experience. So to the extent that you can look at those entry level roles and see if in fact you can either decrease the number of years of experience required, much like college degrees, maybe those years of experience also are not necessary. I think that may help with getting that young workforce in, which brings me to another recommendation. Is oftentimes public sector jobs are really task focused. You have to work on a task force, you have to do this, this, and this, right? It's a list of tasks, but not necessarily mission and outcome. And young people really want to have purposeful, meaningful work. And so if part of the orientation, in addition to the job titles, can be really focused on what you're going to get done, like what is this about? I think that really excites people and wants them to, get them to apply. Another issue is around guardrails. So I get the process. I've actually taught this process of how to apply for public jobs, and it is way too complicated. The reason that it's given is because it protects you from hiring your niece or nephew, right? Essentially, it provides that guardrail. But what you lose in that is in any other space, you can network, you can bring in talent that is good, but you can in the public sector. So is there a way where you can protect the merit, but still allow for some of that networking to happen? That's just an open question for us to think through, because I think in any other workspace you can do that, but you can't in the public sector, which is very odd and challenging. So how do we design so that you can recruit based on people's reputation to deliver a good work product? And then finally, what are the challenges for moving to jobs is that you have a list of requirements. You have done this, this, and this, and this. And in order to get the next level, the next grade, if you hadn't done that, you can't move in. And so it gets really challenging for people who are outside of the public sector to apply for higher level positions. So how do you sort of solve for that? That's an open question as well. I don't have a recommendation on that, but I did want to highlight that because that's a real challenge. Then you end up really having a small pool of talent for those higher level positions. Because if you didn't do X, Y, and Z in the government, well, you can't do it at the next grade. That means a whole bunch of talent just cannot apply. And we lose, and we want the best people doing this work. So I can go on, but I won't. I love this work. I'm so thankful that you're taking this on, and I'm really excited to see the result of all of it. Thank you.
So just to your comments, I would just say some of these things, and I'm so glad that you find this very exciting. I too found it exciting. Many of these things we have begun to talk about and are embedded in some of these recommendations. Because you specifically talked about young people in entry-level jobs, I just think it's a good opportunity for me to plug the service year option and those young people that we have all invested in to bring the service year option to the state of Maryland, which is a premier program that many other states are trying to replicate. We see those hundreds of young people. They are all between the ages of 18 and 21. I say collectively, we currently have 280 young people in the service year option. We want for their next, because they're only in that fellowship or they're only in that program for 1 year. Our goal is that becomes a strong pipeline into state government, that if you've done the service year option, that the next thing that you do is that you come into state government, you have a little bit of experience, you've been in a public funded program. And so we think that will hopefully begin to create some momentum and increase our attractiveness with the younger population. I think you're 100% right about being mission driven in these job announcements. That's what we were referring to about understanding that job postings are marketing materials. And no one wants a list of tasks they're going to do every day. They want to talk about impact. They want to talk, we need job descriptions that elevate what you're doing and how you're going to make a difference in the world. So I think you're 100% correct there. Secretary Grady and I were both nodding our head when you talked about that rotational program. That is an extraordinary program in the federal government. I'm very aware of it, and we absolutely should do more of that in state government. So I appreciate your comments, appreciate your support of the work that we're doing. You're spot on, and we will take everything that you've said under advisement. Thank you so much.
I just want to add, we are actively recruiting for the next executive director of the OPSB. In case you want to bring that passion to DBN.
Great. Thank you very much, Delegate Wallach. Next, we'll take questions from Delegate McCaskill.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Madam Chair Edwards. So first, I just want to say that I too, my heart is beating fast. This is not a hint to a subcommittee change. However, it does my heart well to see the task force and the different representation that you have. And for many of you may know that labor is me. And so I'm extremely excited to know that labor is on this task force, because I am very concerned in any job, especially in our state, because I have had state jobs where work environment wasn't protected. And so it does my heart very warm to see collective bargaining there. But I'm looking at, and to go off of one of my colleagues mentioning about the youth. For some of you, you may know that youth is a baby for you. And I was looking at some of your slides, especially slides 7, 10, and 11. And I was thinking about the application process from 2013 to those applicants to 2023. And I'm looking forward to seeing what is to come because of the task force. So I do applaud you all. But I'm thinking about specifically slide 11, where you have the applicant survey of where the applicants came from or where they heard about the state employment. And so I'm thinking about job fair in school. And I'm not sure if that school is from a collegiate standpoint or a high school standpoint. I'm not sure where that came from, where that is from. But I'm thinking about and moving forward, and it could be just timing. I'm sure our governor, he had quite a bit of priorities to get to and get through. But I'm thinking about moving forward, and I was thinking about apprenticeships, et cetera, entry-level jobs for our schools, allowing them to have availability. And this could just have been the way you market it. I don't know. But and making sure at job fairs in schools, I know for myself, that's where I got my start. But I also had resources and tools when it came to entry-level jobs. But I see that's at the lower end outside of the internet. So I'm not sure if that was just a marketing or what, but I do think that we could capture those younger communities at the school level, collegiate level, high school, and at these job fairs, and allowing them to have the resilience and the new visions instead of having that task list, if you will, because they are always moving forward, thinking out the box of how to move our government forward as well. So I'm just wanted to just make my 2 cents about what I've observed from from slide 11 about how the job fair and the school recruitment, it didn't really come from that.
Yeah.
That maybe we could move and target them in a new vision.
You're absolutely right, Delegate. I think the one resounding thing that we all agree is that we need to get to young people earlier. We need to make sure that state government does have a pipeline for support for entry-level jobs. I think apprenticeships are an amazing way to do that. And you're right, we are not in schools, and when I say not in schools, I don't think we're in colleges or high schools. That is just not where we've recruited. So you're 100% right that there's a lot of work that we can do there. And if we want to change that bar and make sure that we have more young people in state government, which we all need and can benefit from, then we've got to go where young people are. And we've got to make sure that those entry-level jobs are really entry-level and does not have all of the barriers that you spoke to. So we agree with that 100%. And I'm looking forward to the work that we will start to do to get to a much younger workforce for the state. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Delegate McCaskill. Next, we'll take questions. Delegate Harris.
Appreciate it, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you, Secretaries, for your reports. This was actually really good. I just wanted to talk and discuss in the current budget that you all add into, IT support, because there's a lot of things that you all talked about during this process about, if an applicant had a tracker to view where they are in that process, as well as one of the things you mentioned I thought was extremely key is that if an applicant was actually qualified for another position, maybe that the IT infrastructure that we put in place will be able to ping them and say, hey, click this option. Hey, click that option. And so I just want to know, is that a thought to help streamline that process and may bring that 127 days down to like maybe 97, but just a thought there. That's my first question right now.
So Delegate, you're speaking my love language. That is something that I just was blown away about the lack of tools and resources that we really need to be dynamic and to really engage with applicants. Everybody does everything through notifications, making sure people can apply on their phones, making sure that people can track on their phones. There is so much technology out there that could help us be smarter, more efficient, and make sure that we have a better applicant experience. And you're 100% right. It's going to take some investment. That's why I sit close to Secretary Grady, because when you talk about that one-time money that she highlighted that's currently in the budget, those are the kinds of things that I think that we could do to take the people we have who are working very hard. The name of the game is working smart, right? And so we need to give the workforce that we have these amazing HR professionals across the state. They are great. But I could not imagine trying to screen applications on a piece of paper with this pen. It would not be good. Right? So we've got to give our current staff the tools that they need so that they can do a better job of engaging with the applicant pool. And I'll just say this because I talked about this a lot with Secretary Grady. The worst thing that could happen, the worst thing that could happen is that we double the number of applicants and we triple the time period that we use, that we get back with people, and that we make their experience applying to state government worse than what it is today. So if we want to grow that pipeline, we better have the tools to be able to nurture and cultivate and respond to said pipeline. So there is a worst case scenario, which is no investment in the tools that we need to do this really important work. And so you and I should team up on her and make sure that that is a priority. And I know that Secretary Grady does also support that. We need to give across state government, we need to give folks the tools they need to be successful. So I agree with you 100%. And that's the kind of thing that we should be considering with some of this one-time money that has been set aside.
And I would just comment maybe on top of what Secretary Edwards mentioned, just a couple comments. So one, a little bit of a shout out to this team at OPSB. I do think that they're very receptive to technology and tools. I think they've been on the leading edge of state government in some respects, although as we all know and understand, state government is not necessarily the leading edge, but within state government, I think they've been leaders in some respects, particularly around Workday implementation. Tribute to Cindy Colner, who retired in December, and our job app system. But I also want to just do a shout out. One of the initiatives in the governor's budget, once you all have a chance to dig into it, is around Maryland Digital Service initiative out underdo it and Secretary Savage. And I'm really eager. Secretary Savage has recruited, with the help of many of these folks, some pretty incredible talent to her leadership team, and including someone who's going to be heading up our digital services vision and implementation across state agencies. And I think we're a prime client. So we're very eager. I think I have a meeting with her actually Friday to start talking about some of the ways we can collaborate. HR would be one of the first areas that we'd like to be able to assess and plan out, like, what is it that we need in order to accomplish the vision we're all talking about.
Absolutely, appreciate it. And last question, Vice Chair. So now the next question is the retention piece. And so have you ever done a study or reviewed or took a look at bringing down the retirement age to see if that would help with not only bringing in new folks, but as well as, you know, allowing people to retire sooner than a 67, 65 time period that we currently have right now?
It's a great question. I'm going to turn to my colleague Catherine next to me to just ask whether there's been much study or analysis. I'm not aware of any in my year here of any significant study around potential reductions to the retirement age. I can imagine it would carry quite a fiscal impact. But I'm just curious to Catherine if that's been a focused effort.
Not as far as I'm aware, no, it has not.
Thank you very much, Delegate Harris. Next, we'll take a question from Delegate Anderson.
All right, looks like I'm the last one, so we'll go quick here, but I would be remiss, the 18-year-old version of me, the 20-year-old version of me, 30-year-old me, even 40-year-old me, would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that I saw on page 14, let's see if I can do this well, that we're starting to move away from the requirement of college degrees for everything. So clearly, I guess you can tell I'm one of the people who did not go to college. And so I have beat my head against a paper ceiling my entire adult life and have been told time and time again, even applying for the state as a much younger, more svelte version of myself, that how could it be indeed? I don't know. He is long gone, but that I've been told, you know, that if you had a degree, so I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to the governor who mentioned it last year, and I'm grateful to you to see this happen. So that way future 18-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old versions of me will not have to fight that obstacle, that obstacle will be removed, and they have the opportunity to earn a wage to enjoy the quality of life that everybody else has the opportunity, even though they had an alternative path to get to where they are. And so I think that's great. And I would, like I said, I just felt like I had to address it because it is finally something that I've looked forward to seeing. And so here in Annapolis, everything has to finish with a question. So my question will be, is it cold enough for you outside?
Well, first of all, I just want to be very clear that this is an administration that really wants to open the door of state government. And we all, no matter what agency you talk to, we all share that. We value experience, we value people's eagerness to serve. And that comes in a lot of different shapes. And that means we need to tap into, as we've already said, the disability community. We need to tap into the military community. And absolutely, you should not be barred from serving your state and serving your neighbor because you do or do not have a college degree. That does not make sense. And so there are times where it's necessary, but when it's not necessary, it shouldn't be a requirement. And so I think that we are kind of moving in that direction. I'm really proud of the work that DBM has already started to do around reviewing job specifications and asking the question. There's not a default assumption that you have to have a college degree. People are asking, is a college degree required and why? Right? So we're starting to have those questions. So you can look forward to the younger version of you showing up one day in state service. But we do support that. And as you can see, it's a core principle of the work that we're doing. And heck yeah, it's more than cold enough for me. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
Thank you very much, Delegate Anderson, for sharing your passionate life experience and about bringing the educational diversity to the table. Really appreciate it. Next, we'll take a question from Delegate Watson.
Mr. Chair, my question has to do with the 200,000 applications. Do you know how many applicants that represented?
Mark, you have that, right?
Yeah, it's roughly 2.5 applications per unique applicant. So you're looking at on 220, what's that, 130-ish.
Individual unique persons. And to your point, I think someone mentioned a common application process. That's in our recommendations. That's also something that's really interesting, that if you want to apply to be an executive assistant for natural resources, and there's also an executive assistant role available in public safety, and there's an executive assistant role available in DBM. That requires 3 different applications, and 3 different people are managing that process. And so we do have a lot, even at 100,000 people, that's a good number of applicants. And what that 200,000 number tells you is that people are super eager because they're putting in more than one application, but we don't have any way to share that information. Everybody's like, what? Yes, that does not make sense. And so when you talk about technology and how do we collaborate across agencies around these kinds of things, those are some of the things that I think would make a huge difference and would speed up the process for hiring, because I can be an executive assistant with a common application across 10 agencies. I'm going to get a job somewhere, right? But I've got to do that over and over again and hear no over and over again, which can be really hard for people, and to say, I just give up. So I think that's a really important step that we can take in improving the process.
So my follow-up to that is just that it represents, that 130,000 number represents about, according to my quick math anyway, 2% of the working age population in Maryland. I don't know if that is good or bad, but it is what it is. So thank you for your answer.
Thank you. I appreciate you asking.
Thank you very much, Delegate Watson. Are there any other questions from members of the committee for this panel? Thank you so much, Secretary Edwards and Secretary Grader, for being here. Very much appreciated, and to the entire staff. Thank you very much to the entire panel. Appreciate it.
Thank
Next,
you.
we'll call up the next panel, which will be Denise Gilmore, Listed Director of AFSCME Council 3. Ms. Gilmore, thank you very much for being here. Please proceed with your presentation.
All right, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Denise Gilmore, and I am the Legislative Director for AFSCME Maryland Council 3. I first want to thank this committee for giving us the opportunity to respond to the recommendations that came out. I think continuing to include the voices of employees on these decisions is incredibly important, and we appreciate that you want to hear feedback from them. We represent 45,000 state, county, and municipal employees. I, along with my colleagues Hank Hollis and Stuart Katzenberg, proudly represented our hardworking and dedicated members on the interim task force on the modernization of state personnel management system that you just heard from. We really want to also thank the Moore administration and staff from DBM and MDOT for the time and efforts that they put into this task force. I will be the first to admit that I was perhaps a tad bit skeptical when the appointments secretary was put in charge of chairing the task force that was looking at the merit system. But I have to say, Chair Edwards really, truly did a wonderful job, I think, incorporating the feedback from all of our task force members. And ultimately, we are very pleased with the recommendations that ended up in this report. I'm going to discuss a few recommendations in a bit more detail But I want to begin by highlighting at least 3 big areas of consensus that the task force reached that were very important for us. The first is that the SPMS or merit system, and then the personnel article that governs it, was carefully developed over decades here in Maryland. And its purpose, which is to provide for a consistent and transparent way to do, an unbiased way to do personnel transactions, really is critically important to maintain as we work to bring our state government, and more specifically, its recruitment and hiring practices into year 2024 finally, right? It's because of these merit, hiring system that the state governments, for instance, generally do better on things like racial and wealth wage gaps, right? Because we have wage transparency that are already built into our laws. We still have a ways to go that, we're going to work on that. But we generally tend to do better than the private sector, right? We know that the workforces in state government can oftentimes be more reflective of the, population at large than sometimes, even in private sector because of these same, protections against discrimination, things like that. So, it really, leaving this task force, I think we all, have a very clear direction that, maintaining the merit system certainly is important. And, where we look to make improvements, we want to make sure that we're maintaining at least, that spirit. The second thing that I think really became consensus and, is rightfully pointed to in the report is that to really implement these recommendations, we're going to need resources. I want to kind of tell the story here of a 15-year employee because I've had a few that have been in my ear recently. But we're looking at that employee that started around 2008, 2009, 2010. They've been for the state now for 14, 15 years. They were still, they entered state at a time when you could get your full benefits at 16 years. So they're on that kind of cusp, right? To at least get to 16 years in state service so that they're eligible for some portion of their health benefits for the rest of their life. What they have experienced in that time is first the Great Recession. During the Great Recession, state employees gave back in total about $5 billion in lost pay and benefits. We had to negotiate a furlough plan to stop, massive cuts from happening. There were across the board agency cuts that, really left many of our state agencies working on skeleton crews. Well, then we start to get out of the recession and we enter, 2015 through 2019. These are years that Maryland state government, was maintaining budget surpluses. At the same time, we saw that many county governments were, starting to lift salaries again to make up for, salaries lost during the recession. We saw surrounding states do this. Unfortunately, here in Maryland, that was not the plan for the administration who was in office at that time. They maintained hiring freezes. They weren't giving, cost of living increases that kept up with actual costs of living increases. Folks weren't getting steps. So that 15-year employee who's working for the state of Maryland today is because of years of missed pay and years of misstep is actually on a salary schedule that suggests that they've been working there for half the time that they actually have, right? They're missing, as many as 7 steps in some instances. And so when we try to figure out the whole picture in terms of, like, I want to give the Moore administration incredible, from day one, they got into the office and they started to really focus on hiring. And it shows with the number of applications that have been received, with the number of hiring they does, but we've got a net hire problem, right? This piece on making sure that we're retaining state employees is really important too. And obviously was not, a focus of this work group necessarily, but as we continue our, work on rebuilding state government, we really want to highlight that, we do need to really focus on retaining our state workforce as well. And then the third, big area of consensus for us is that, you know, the task force recommendations provide a pathway for the state in conjunction with employee unions to really fix some long-standing and important issues around, you know, having accurate job descriptions, having, you know, good progressing career ladders like we've talked about today, and, you know, within positions, making sure that our agencies are sharing information about candidates, that we improve the applicant experience, and that, you know, the accountability issues that we had been having with agencies that really has been preventing the state from, you know, giving off a competent first impression to many new hires, you know, are being focused on to fix through these recommendations too. And we think that's, look, before we, you know, start to do big changes in state personnel law, like, you know, I couldn't agree with, you know, Secretary Edwards more. Let's see if we can, you know, clean up some of these, you know, internal things that we can control. And we feel very, you know, pleased that, you know, the task force and, you know, the ongoing, you know, labor management collaborations that we're, you know, looking forward to participating with, you know, we'll continue focusing on that. You know, I also want to thank you all, the legislator, for your continued advocacy and oversight for starting, you know, to hire these state jobs again. We're absolutely actively recruiting and, you know, getting more applications in. You know, the task force recommendation, I think, focuses rightly, you know, on building up capacity in our HR apparatus. That both means tech, right, and people. I'm not often in this position to agree with, you know, the administration before me, but I have to agree completely. We don't have enough capacity in our HR to both administer recruitment, help employees with their benefit questions. You know, there's going to be an enormous, in case you haven't heard, there's an enormous shift happening with retiree prescription benefits beginning in July. We're very concerned, in January. You know, we're very concerned, you know, how implementation is going to work there and given current capacity. And, you know, certainly, well, I'll get to that in a minute, but there are, you know, a lot of initiatives that, you know, if it's around, you know, implementing reverse auction, you know, prescription Medicaid, like there are a lot of initiatives that DBM has to take on right now. We are very concerned about capacity. And I think, you know, there are a few areas in the report that really deserve some highlighting too. You know, the first is that, you know, there's been some talk about the SPMS kind of timeline, right? And on the actual report, I think this is on pages 11 and 12, they give a scenario of what the ideal hiring timeline is from when an employee you know, puts in their 2 weeks notice to when you know, an employee can be hired into that position. And it is, you know, taking into account some, you know, statutory deadlines. It's about 60 days actually in the report. You know, we feel that this timeline, you know, first of all, like a lot of the things in the timeline are very important, again, to make sure that we're not, you know, as, you know, hiring our nieces and nephews, right? We have to make sure that we're doing that thorough analysis. But I really want to, you know, hit on the recommendations that are in the SPMS task force are really, I think, are going to help improve this, right? For years, we've been calling for open and continuous, you know, enrollment. The state should, you know, continue collecting these applications in, you know, knowing that jobs go vacant. And, you know, that is a recommendation that is on this, you know, task force that we think will really help with bringing that down. The second thing that will really help is building capacity to be able to score candidates when that application is received. I mean, it was news to me that the state was waiting, you know, until after job postings actually to start scoring, you know, applications. You know, that's ideally our hiring process in the state has the capacity to start looking at those applications as soon as they come in and provide that scoring. We think those things will you know, contribute to an even faster timeline. But again, need resources and investment to be able to happen. We also think it would be helpful to do more job-specific research on this. But I really want to highlight too that, as you heard, it's not so much an issue, with recruiting applicants or getting enough applicants. The state is getting many applications, thousands of applications. People want these jobs, right? Where we generally lose folks, though, it is during that application process, when salary discussions happen, or when applicants haven't heard back on their application for a while and are maybe offered a job somewhere else. So again, the salary discussions are going to have to continue to be ongoing in this, but around improving applicant communication, if we couple those two things, we think that should really help too. All of these issues relate to our ability to, retain employees. We were happy to, excited to partner with the administration and some agencies on a kind of national bus tour that our union took, to really dig into this, staffing the front lines, really dig into what's happening with staffing in state and local governments nationally. And they came up with kind of 6 broad themes that contribute or could help with public sector staffing. The first is compensation. We've talked about this already. I don't want to, beat a dead horse here, but compensation really matters, and we have to make sure that we have competitive salaries. People can be as mission focused as they want, but at the end of the day, if they can't afford to, put food on the table, they are going to leave and find a job where they can, pay their bills. The second is workplace flexibility. That includes, being able to telework, flex schedules. The state really has an opportunity, I think, this year to become a leader in that. We did work together on a telework policy last year that we hope will be rolled out soon. This third, important component is providing career pathways. You'll see that is reflected in these recommendations, looking at classifications and finding ways to have jobs, from entry level to promotion, really having the ability to grow in your career. The fourth, which is what this task force was looking at, is barriers to hiring. Certainly where there are barriers to getting folks hired, we want to dig in and look at that. And we're happy we spent all fall, looking at kind of the internal things that are happening that are, acting as barriers to hiring. And, I think this year we can continue to look at, additional barriers. The fifth is safety, something to take into account, I think, with public sector jobs a lot in particular, is they're often very dangerous. If it's from public safety to, public health or transportation, right? These are jobs that generally have higher, risk rates for injuries and than fatalities, sadly, than, many, private sector jobs. And then finally, the sixth really important component to fixing the kind of, staffing issues in local government is workload, right? And ideally, if you, fix all of, issues 1 through 6, it'll lead to more people. This will help with workload. But I think that's something, as we have shrunk our state governments and really shrunk in positions, the employees who are there now are required to cover the burden of those missing positions. So you see that either in high overtime, which the state is still continuing to carry. You see it in caseloads, which, are still much higher than many of our members, wish they were. And these are things that are contributing to people, leaving. They're leaving for jobs that don't require, being mandated on overtime 4 times a week. They're leaving for, positions that have smaller caseloads. So we know all these things combined, if we continue to work on them, really should, finally get us to an adequate staffing level in the state. But as you all are a budget committee, I really want to, emphasize that we need more resources to do it. And that investment is critical. and it helps. For every $1 we put into state spending, $1.50 in benefits comes back to our communities. There are a lot of just like economic policy reasons for supporting our state government. And we hope that as we look this year, especially and what is a tough fiscal environment, that we continue to prioritize our state employees, our retirees. Certainly once an employee has, dedicated a career of service to the state, they deserve to, retire with dignity. And we know that rising healthcare costs, rising prescription costs are one of the largest contributors to increasing costs of living for retirees. So that is an issue that we're going to continue to monitor this year and hope to be able to find some solutions on with this committee too. I'll, leave it there. I think, again, what a difference a year makes. I know I was in front of you all a year ago. We had just come out of, another round of unfortunately pretty awful, negotiations. Here I can say, a year later, I largely agree with the panel that was up before me. And we hope that we can, continue working together to adequately staff our state government. It matters everywhere. When the state is shut down or when we don't have adequate resources, it really truly does affect all Marylanders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gilmore, for your presentation, and thank you for your service on the task force. Very much appreciate your collaborative spirit. The committee will now take any questions for Ms. Gilmore. Thank you very much, Ms. Gilmore, for being here. And that concludes today's briefing. On behalf of Appropriations Committee Chairman Ben Barnes, thank you very much to everyone for being here today and being part of this briefing. Have a great afternoon. Thank you. Right, yeah, right.